Murky water swirled in violent circles. A tiny body struggled against the force of the current, small paws brashing in despair. On the bank, a golden silhouette watched the scene with growing tension. The river showed no mercy. With each passing second, the distance between life and death diminished. What happened in the next few moments would challenge everything we know about instinct, territory, and survival on the African savanna. The morning had begun peacefully on the savanna plains. The sun, still low, cast long shadows over the golden grass that stretched as far as the eye could see. By the riverbank, a lioness rested while watching her cub play among the damp stones. The small, curious, and energetic cub leaped from rock to rock, testing its limits with the innocence typical of one who does not yet understand the dangers of the wild world. A few meters away, a golden-coated golden retriever walked alone along the opposite bank. He had become separated from a group of researchers 3 days earlier, when he followed the trail of an unknown animal deep into the forest. Since then, he had wandered the savanna, guided only by his survival instinct and the hope of finding his way back. His paws were tired, his fur dusty, but his eyes still shone with that characteristic loyalty of his breed. The river was flowing more strongly than usual. The previous night's rains had swollen its banks, transforming the normally calm flow into a treacherous current. The muddy water dragged branches and leaves, creating dangerous eddies near the rocks where the cub played. The lioness raised her head, sniffing the air. Something about that morning seemed different, laden with a tension she couldn't quite identify. Disaster struck in a matter of seconds. The cub, excited by its exploration, leaped onto a moss-covered rock at the water's edge. Its front paws slipped on the smooth surface, and before it could react, its small body was thrown directly into the current. The impact with the cold water took all the air from its lungs. It tried to scream, but only water filled its mouth. The current immediately grabbed it, dragging it downstream with a force impossible for someone so young and inexperienced to resist. The lioness reacted instantly. Her roar tore through the morning air, a sound laden with terror and maternal despair. She ran to the water's edge, her paws slipping in the mud as she watched her cub's body being carried away by the current. Her instincts screamed at her to dive in, to save her offspring at any cost. But something more primal kept her paralyzed on the bank. She had seen adult lions swallowed by that same river during floods. The water respected neither claws, teeth, nor strength. It was certain death. On the other side of the river, the golden retriever raised its head sharply at the sound of the roar. Its trained eyes immediately identified the scene. A puppy struggling in the water, sinking and resurfacing at increasingly longer intervals. A desperate mother running along the bank, unable to help. The dog didn't think. It didn't calculate risks or consequences. Its rescue instinct, honed by generations of its lineage, took complete control. It took 3 steps back and darted towards the river. The dive was perfect. The golden retriever cut through the water's surface with its chest, its paws immediately beginning to paddle with force and coordination. The current hit it like a blow, trying to drag it downstream along with the puppy. But golden retrievers were bred for water rescues. Their muscular bodies and double coats gave them natural buoyancy. Their webbed paws propelled them through the water with impressive efficiency. He kept his head up, his eyes fixed on the small body struggling a few meters ahead. The puppy was rapidly losing strength. Its tiny paws could no longer move with the same intensity. The water entering its lungs with each desperate attempt to breathe robbed it of its last reserves of energy. Its vision began to darken when it felt something firm grasp it by the nape of its neck. The golden retriever's jaws closed delicately around the loose skin of the puppy's neck, just as its mother would carry it. The grip was firm but careful, holding without hurting. With the cub safely in its mouth, the dog turned its body against the current. Each stroke required all its strength. Its muscles burned beneath its soaked fur. The bank seemed miles away, but it continued, paw after paw, inch after inch. The lioness had stopped running and now watched, paralyzed, as that golden stranger struggled against the river with her cub in its jaws. Her whole body trembled between the terror of seeing her offspring in the jaws of another predator and the impossible hope that this could be a rescue. The golden retriever finally reached the shallow water. His paws touched the muddy bottom, and he dragged himself out of the river, his body heavy with exhaustion and his soaked fur. With extreme care, he placed the cub on dry land, away from the treacherous bank. The little lion coughed violently, expelling water from his lungs, while his little body trembled from cold and shock. He was alive, weak, frightened, but breathing. The dog took a few steps back, panting, and lay down on the grass. Every muscle in his body screamed with exhaustion. He had swum against one of the strongest currents he had ever faced, carrying a weight that made everything even more difficult. But as he watched the puppy cough and breathe, something close to satisfaction gleamed in his brown eyes. This was what he was born to do: save lives, protect the defenseless. It didn't matter the species. The lioness was on the other side of the river, the distance between them now an insurmountable barrier. She roared continuously, a sound that mixed relief, confusion, and growing agitation. Her cub was alive, but in the hands of a stranger on the other side of the water. She began to run along the bank, desperately searching for a safer crossing point. Her roars echoed across the savanna, a call that would soon be answered. The golden retriever raised his head, his instincts alerting him that something was changing. The scent in the air had become denser, more dangerous. He was no longer alone with the cub. From the shadows of the acacia tree emerged the first figure, a male lion, immense, his dark mane framing a face marked by scars from countless battles. His golden eyes immediately fixed on the golden retriever and the cub that was a few meters away. Behind the alpha male, other forms emerged from the tall vegetation. 2 adult lionesses, both tense, with muscles ready to attack. Another appeared from the opposite side, slowly circling the scene. The pride had arrived, drawn by the desperate roars of the mother. The golden retriever felt his heart race. He had faced many challenges in his life, but he had never been surrounded by wild predators. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to flee, but he remained still, his body low in a submissive posture, his ears pressed against his head. His eyes darted rapidly between the approaching lions, calculating distances, searching for escape routes that simply did not exist. The savanna, so vast and open, had become a trap. The cub, still weak and disoriented, raised its head upon smelling the familiar scent of its pride. A faint meow escaped its aching throat. Immediately, the lions reacted. The nearest lioness moved swiftly, placing herself between the cub and the golden retriever. Her fangs gleamed in the morning light as a guttural growl echoed from her chest. The alpha male approached with measured steps, each movement laden with authority and power. He stopped just 3 meters from the golden retriever, his penetrating gaze analyzing every detail of the intruder who dared to touch a member of his pride. The tension in the air was palpable. The alpha male took another step forward, his heavy breathing creating clouds of vapor in the still cool morning air. His growl was deep, vibrating through the ground like distant thunder. The golden retriever knew he was seconds away from an attack. He had trespassed on sacred territory, touched a cub of the pride. By the laws of the savanna, his fate was already sealed. Yet he did not flee. His eyes remained lowered in a sign of respect, but his body shielded the path between the lions and the still vulnerable cub. Then something unexpected happened. The puppy, gathering the last of his strength, dragged himself toward the golden retriever. His steps were trembling, unsteady but determined. He approached the golden dog and pressed his small body against the front paw of the animal that had saved him. A faint purr emanated from his chest, that primal sound of trust and gratitude that all felines share from birth. The puppy didn't see a predator. He only saw the one who had plunged into the deadly waters to rescue him. The effect on the adult lions was immediate. The lioness who had advanced aggressively froze in place, her ears flapping forward in confusion. The alpha male tilted his head slightly, his growl diminishing in intensity. He had witnessed something that defied all his instincts. His cub, a future member of the pride, was showing affection to a complete stranger. The lions exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them as they tried to process the impossible scene before their eyes. On the other side of the river, the mother cub finally found a shallow enough spot to cross. She plunged into the water without hesitation, swimming forcefully through the still dangerous current. Her paws touched the other bank and she emerged, dripping with water, her eyes fixed on her cub. Her roar echoed once more, but this time there was something different about it. It wasn't just despair or anger. It was a maternal call, urgent and charged with emotion. The cub lifted its head at the sound of its mother's voice. It slowly moved away from the golden retriever, its legs still wobbly, and began to walk toward it. The lioness rushed to it, crouching down to sniff it intensely, her rough tongue licking every inch of its soaked fur. She turned it over, checking for injuries, her whole body trembling with relief at finding it unharmed. Then, her eyes lifted and met those of the golden retriever. For a long moment, lioness and dog stared at each other. There were no words, only primal understanding. She had seen everything. She had witnessed the moment that stranger plunged without hesitation into the deadly waters. She had watched as he struggled against the current, carrying his cub with a delicacy that belied his own exhaustion. The golden retriever remained motionless, waiting. The alpha male approached the lioness and her cub, sniffing them both. His posture began to subtly shift. His muscles were still tense, but the growl had completely ceased. He looked at the golden dog with those ancestral eyes that had seen generations born and die on the savanna. The sky began to darken rapidly. Heavy, black clouds gathered on the horizon, bringing with them the harbinger of another storm. The wind increased in intensity, whipping the tall grass and making the acacia trees sway violently. The river, already turbulent, began to rise even faster. The rain falling in the distant mountains was sending a new wave of water, more powerful than the last. The earth beneath his feet began to tremble slightly with the force of the approaching flood. The lions sensed the change immediately. Their survival instincts overwhelmed any other impulse. The alpha male roared an order to the pride, a sound that echoed with urgency. The lionesses began to retreat toward higher ground, their eyes alternating between the crumbling bank and the still weak cub at its mother's feet. The lioness grasped her cub by the scruff of the neck, but it was too heavy, soaked and exhausted. She stumbled, her paws slipping in the rapidly liquefying mud. That's when the bank gave way. An entire chunk of land crumbled beneath the lioness's paws, causing her to slide dangerously toward the river, which now roared like a hungry beast. The cub escaped her mouth, rolling toward the water. The golden retriever didn't hesitate. Ignoring his own exhaustion, ignoring the obvious danger, he darted toward the cub. His jaws gripped it inches from the water. At the same time, he stretched his body, allowing the lioness to use his back as leverage to propel herself back onto solid ground. For endless seconds, the three remained frozen there, balanced on the edge of the abyss. With one last superhuman effort, the golden retriever pulled the cub back, while the lioness found firm support. The three moved away from the crumbling bank, the river swallowing the patch of land where they had stood seconds before. The lioness took her cub in her arms again, pressing it against her chest as she retreated to where the pride awaited in safety. The alpha male watched everything, his golden eyes fixed on the exhausted dog who had risked his life twice for the same cub. What happened next defied thousands of years of territorial instinct. The alpha male slowly approached the golden retriever. The dog, too exhausted to move, could only watch as the immense lion stopped before him. For an interminable moment, predator and savior stared at each other. Then, in a gesture no human observer could believe, the lion inclined his head slightly, a silent acknowledgement. He turned and walked towards his pride, leaving a clear path for the dog. The lioness, with her cub safe, paused and looked back one last time. Her eyes met those of the golden retriever, and in that gaze there was something indescribable. It wasn't just gratitude, but respect, recognition of a courage that transcended species. The cub, nestled against its mother, raised its small head and emitted one last weak meow toward its savior. The pride slowly moved away, their silhouettes disappearing into the tall grass as the storm finally arrived in full force. The golden retriever stood there for long minutes, watching the lions walk away. His body trembled with exhaustion, but something shone in his eyes. He had done what he was born to do. When he finally stood up and began to walk in the opposite direction, the rain washed away his footprints, but not the memory of what had happened on that riverbank. Two species that should have been enemies had shared something rare and precious, a moment where life was worth more than territory, where courage spoke louder than instinct. And as the golden dog disappeared on the horizon, the savanna silently guarded the secret of a day when the rules were broken and compassion won. If you enjoyed this story, please like it, subscribe to the channel to help me bring you more stories, and turn on notifications. Comment on what you thought and leave tips and suggestions in the comments. There's much more content waiting for you here on the channel. Keep watching and discover other incredible stories that will touch your heart.